And for more on this, let's bring in ABC News political director Rick Klein and Brandeis University American history professor and ABC News contributor Leah Wright-Rigueur. Thank you both for being here. Rick, I want to start with you. Why isn't the White House saying anything about this phone call with the president?
Well, there isn't much good to say. The audio is all out there, and it's pretty clear that the president is at times berating, cajoling, even potentially threatening the Secretary of State, all in the service not of an accurate count, but in changing the electoral results. Now, the best that some of the president's allies might say about this is that it's in the context of a legal disagreement because there are lawsuits against the state of Georgia, although that isn't backed up by the audio. But mostly the president's allies are attacking the Secretary of State for leaking this audio, for putting it out there publicly. But that only happened once the president went out and tweeted about the conversation misleadingly, saying that Raffensperger wasn't able to provide evidence for the claims that he was making.
Leah, how surprising is it for a president to make the kinds of requests and accusations that we heard on this call? Have we seen this before?
So it's incredibly surprising for a president to make these kinds of accusations and to make these kinds of demands. But I would say that it's not surprising for somebody like Donald Trump. We've seen this already. We saw this with, the Ukrainian president. We've seen this with other elections. We've seen this with Trump in person, essentially making demands of people. So that's not so surprising. I'd say the closest thing that we have to this would be something like Richard Nixon and Watergate, but this makes Watergate look like a cakewalk. There is essentially, this is unprecedented in modern times for a president to make these kind of demands, to make these kinds of asks. And it's not just towing the line of legality, it's also towing the line of decency and of fairness and of democracy.
And Rick, President Trump was impeached a year ago, accused of pressuring a foreign leader to dig up dirt on his political opponent. How does this situation compare?
Well, I think pretty clearly, based on the text, it is something that would be worthy of consideration of impeachment. And I think some Democrats have already said as much. Of course, the president only has 2 weeks left in his term, so it's not clear what that would accomplish. But I'll tell you, for someone who's had conversations with President Trump over the years, this sounds like him. And particularly for people that have talked to him in recent weeks, exactly what he has been saying, that he believes these things, that he has been told a whole lot of different things. And his negotiating style of some flattery, some kind of vague threats, that is classic Trump. And I think that is a through line through the Ukraine phone call, as well as this phone call, that seems very similar and very familiar to a lot of people around the president. That doesn't make any of it right, doesn't make any of it acceptable. And I think this puts a lot of pressure on Republicans who are challenging election results to try to explain how they can back the president when he is saying this as explicitly as he has. I think in another context, though, impeachment would definitely be on the table.
And Leah, more than 150 Republicans in Congress now say they plan to object to the election results when the electoral votes are counted. How historic would that objection be?
Again, another historic moment for all the wrong reasons. And I do want to point out there are a number of Republicans, very prominent Republicans in Congress, in the Senate, in the House, outside, former politicians who have all rejected this, right? We can point to somebody like Liz Cheney, who has an enormous amount of control, who has said that this is the absolutely wrong message. But I think one of the things that we should point out is that Republicans that are doing this and this kind of really big display of loyalty, even in the face of kind of being overwhelmingly wrong, are doing this not necessarily out of fear of Donald Trump. I think that ship has sailed. What they're doing this is because they're interested in, and they want Donald Trump's voters. They want those 74 million voters who cast ballots for Donald Trump. So we're seeing a lot of negotiating. We're seeing a lot of spectacle. We're seeing a lot of pomp and circumstance around the contesting the election. And I think one thing to point out is there are very, very few paths in which this works out in favor of the Republicans. And so a lot of this is spectacle and is a big display and show of loyalty to the Republican base. That doesn't make it any less dangerous, and it doesn't make it any less wrong.
And this is all playing out ahead of tomorrow's critical runoff elections in Georgia that will decide control of the Senate. Now, Senator David Perdue is standing behind President Trump, saying what he said in the recording is no different than what he's been saying for the last 2 months. He also calls the fact that a Republican recorded and leaked this conversation, or would do that, disgusting. So, Rick, how do you see this issue affecting those elections?
Well, I'll tell you, the big concern among Republicans in Georgia is that the president's rhetoric and unfounded allegations about the November election could dampen turnout in this January runoff. The control of the Senate is at stake tomorrow. It's never happened before. You have these two runoffs these 2 Senate seats. If the Democrats win them both, they control the Senate. It's just that simple. So the Republicans need their voters to turn out, and they need them to turn out on Election Day. With the president and Vice President Biden, President-elect Biden, both in the state today, the stakes literally could not be any higher. And this is at best a distraction. At worst, it could be a motivating factor. If Republicans actually believe what the president is saying, that the election was rigged, that election officials have it out against Republicans, it's just one less reason to go vote here on this first Tuesday in January.
And Leah, there's now talk from both parties about changing election law for future elections. Given how and why these laws were founded, what's the likelihood of that happening, and do you think it's advisable?
So I think one of the things that we saw is that, in that tape, that hour-long conversation tape, one of the people that Donald Trump is incredibly afraid of was Stacey Abrams, and is Stacey Abrams. And he says, she has essentially taken us to the closet. And part of that is because she understands the way that elections work and the way that that people vote, why they come out, what motivates them to come out, and how to both work within the law, but also how to push back against laws that people feel are unjust. And so I think what we're going to see, at least, is that particularly on the Democratic side of things, a lot of pushback against laws that people feel are unjust. But the other thing to point out, and I think the Georgia Secretary of State pointed this out in the conversation, is that many of the laws that the Trump people are upset about are laws that Republicans put in place or signed off on happily when it benefited them. So, will we actually see some changes? Highly doubtful, but we may see some pushback in ensuing years.
All right, Rick Klein and Leah Wright Rigueur, always a pleasure having you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.